On the plus side, it stopped raining sometime in the middle of the night, but everything froze, so the tent is kind of an ice sheet. This stuff just tastes glorious on a cold morning. I did pull an inReach weather forecast last night just to kind of give me an idea if the rain was ever going to stop so I could cook. As usual, I do not find the weather forecast that it returns really has much relation to reality, so I don't know why I bother spending the dollar, but there you go. Last reliable weather forecast I had when I had reception said there was still supposed to be some rain today. I'm hoping the sun's going to be out long enough this morning that I can clean up a little bit because there's a bunch of ice all over the tent. I actually had to break the ice over the zipper to get out this morning. There's a glorious sight. It rained at least until I fell asleep. Finally woke up about 2:30 and it had stopped. And I actually opened up the tent, even though it was cold. Usually if the tent's buttoned up, it stays a little bit warmer and maybe keeps some things from freezing in here. But I was hoping just to vent the moisture out. 'Cause the problem is, when you got wet things in here, these layers were pretty wet, so I was wearing them. It vents out, and that will get trapped in here. So the inside of the fly can end up wetter than the outside quite often. Well, it briefly felt like I might be able to dry some things, but sadly, looks like the clouds are coming back in. Okay, it is getting cold again. In a couple of days, if you believe the inReach forecast, it's not even supposed to get above freezing all day. I don't really know much about the place I'm supposed to stay in reserve. As with many people's dating lives, location and availability are kind of like the overriding thing here. It's funny, in a lot of ways, days like this are a lot harder to deal with than if it was just below freezing and snowing. Reason being, when it's warmer and it's actually liquid, layers get wet versus in the snow. Yeah, as the body heat vents out of your body, you'll melt a little bit of the snow and get things a little wet, but generally you can shake things off. I had to go into full-on moisture management mode today. Basically, that liner bag that I wrapped the pack in last night, that is now in use. My sleeping bag, my food bag, and my clothing bag, and my 10 Essentials electronics are inside of that. So that is my dry storage inside the pack. Then I roll the top closed. On top of that is damp storage. Things like layers that didn't completely dry, or the tent, which is damp. I don't want it to get soaking wet, but I don't want it to transfer that dampness onto the important layers. And then I have wet storage, aka things that are on the outside of my pack and have no protection. This is actually why I like having a double wall tent. My single walls, if they get wet, your options are keep them inside, keep them outside. And I don't like having the entire interior of the tent damp when I get in. When that happens, it tends to transfer to your sleeping pad and whatnot and other things. So here, the wet part I can have out top, and assuming the sun ever comes out, I can actually dry it and stow it later. And last night, my base layers were damp. I ended up wearing the shirt and the fleece, and those dried out overnight. I switched into a dry pair of underwear. Shorts are less important. I would have put on dry socks, except I kind of figured with my shoes so wet and with the vegetation so wet, they would just wet out pretty quick. So I would rather have the dry socks in reserve for later. All of this is less important because I'm going into town. Theoretically, I could have just thrown everything in the bag, and who cares what gets wet and what transfers to what. Reason I don't, partially it's just habit. This is how I deal with stuff. And partially it's, you never know. Okay, 11 miles, that should be no problem, a couple of hours. But let's say I take another fall and all of a sudden I'm stuck and I have to wait a day or two until somebody can get out here. So similar to the whole thing, you never know when you're going to end up in town when you don't expect it. The opposite can happen. So I always kind of treat things the same. Weather like this in the shoulder seasons is also why I went back to mummy bag versus running around with my quilt. The other part being, there's something more kind of comforting, I guess, about sliding into a mummy bag and zipping it all around you. And quilts are basically like, putting a blanket on top of you and tucking it around. And that's fine, but if it's like last night where I was pretty chilled and damp, I am quite happy to have my mummy. This is why I don't care for the one-size-fits-all view of ultralight that some of the influencer types give. Oh yeah, everybody needs, Z-Plax, Duplex, Revelation quilt, etc., etc. It's one thing to have general guidelines, but there are reasons to adjust some of this stuff. And a lot of it, I've had to go away from lighter weight gear just because of both the longer style trips, how long I'm spending outside of town, durability, things like that. Over in PCT land, I disagree strongly with a few of the things Ned Tibbetts says regarding snow gear, but he did have a pretty good post he made in one of the PCT groups I follow about ultralight being for, ideal conditions, and all the snow in the Sierra this year not being ideal conditions. So to watch out. When I teach the wilderness class, personally, I recommend, maybe don't splurge on the overly expensive $800 ultralight tent, but spend more of that money on your sleeping system, because at the end of the day, that's your survival layer. If something goes wrong out here, if it gets too cold, and I have had to do this before where I was just getting too chilled, I've got to put up the tent, I've got to get in the sleeping bag, and at that point my buffer is done. I can I have whatever I have, and if it's not warm enough, that's a problem. You will see people talking about, hiking through storms, and that works if it's a mild storm. There are, of course, survivalist level things you can do. You can start a fire if it's dry enough. If everything's wet, that can be kind of a challenge. But a lot of that stuff is rather limited by circumstance. To make the ridiculous level example, Bear Grylls, which a lot of people are familiar with, his demos of skills are so selective as just to be useless. It's like, oh, well, here, I found this old rope and a dead sheep corpse, so here, I'm going to use my survival skills. Similarly, trying to find ways to build shelters out here, requires materials or conditions. Now, in snow, you can build your own, but even there, you're kind of dependent on the snow being the kind that is workable, meaning it's solid enough to build blocks and caves, but not so cold where you can't connect anything and it's all just sugar. A while back, I talked about this lecture we used to do in the wilderness class called the Popsicle Lecture, due to some people passing away back in the 70s on a Sierra Club trip on Ritter and Banner. And they actually got to the point where they tried to make snow shelters, but they waited too long. Some people were basically out of it because once you start to get hypothermic, stumbles, mumbles, and fumbles, and they eventually just crawled into a cave, and only one person came out of there alive, the guy in the middle, who was probably in the best shape of all of them. And the lesson we want people to take away from that is, you sometimes have to make decisions early before other options are taken away from you. There are all sorts of decisions they could have made earlier than that, whether it was, turning around early, bailing off into a lower area, starting to make a shelter earlier, etc., that would have resulted in a better outcome. The guy that survived that actually only did so because the weather broke in the morning. It got warm, he was able to warm up, and he was eventually able to find a cabin, break into that, and eventually get out to help. And as I recall, he was actually put under arrest at the hospital because, Cannibal the Musical rules. You come out and you're the sole survivor of your party. That looks kind of suspicious. This is that low point I was nominally gonna aim for last night with the pond and everything. I kind of figured that the rain wasn't going to get any lighter though, so it was better to set up when I had an opportunity. And sure enough, it started raining hard enough I wasn't able to make dinner for a while. Last hill. Once I get over this next high country bit, a long descent back down to the road. Looking ahead, there are about 200 some miles of mountains kind of like this, relatively gentle, only up to 8,000 or 9,000 feet, which Western rules. Those are babies. That's the front range. It looks like when I hit Silver City, far side of the Black Hills, southern end of that Gila shortcut, then it'll be a little more lowland desert. And from what people were telling me in Pie Town, further south you go, the less the precipitation is, so that'll work in my favor, hopefully. And good thing I'm paying attention. I thought the trail was just going to cross the road. That's the CDT over there. Went down just a bit, checked out a habit, and sure enough, I am going to randomly join this road for a little while. That downhill drops down to that blue line low route. Almost reminds me of mornings on the AT, except I can see longer than 10 feet ahead. Trail keeps doing its disappearing act. Fortunately, there are better waypoint markers here. So at least I get entertained by all the comments from people that accidentally climbed the hill instead of noticing this little track going off to the side. The good news today is, assuming nothing goes wrong as far as getting into town, I should actually get some hot food, which is the first hot food since Grant's that I didn't cook on my stove. And I need to enjoy that because Winston, assuming the store is open, which I am kind of counting on, they have microwave pizzas and things like that. So I won't get town food again until Silver City in 200 plus miles, if everything goes to plan. Fortunately, if things go badly, sometimes you end up in Santa Fe unexpectedly. I am getting the occasional snow flurry, but I don't think it's cold enough for it to stick on the ground. It's always these transitional zones that are the biggest problem, Kind of like, okay, you're on the ground, not a problem. You're on an airplane, not a problem. Falling out of an airplane, I mean, not an immediate problem. The transition from falling out of an airplane to on the ground, that's the problem. Kind of figured I wasn't the only person up here, but it's the first actual vehicle I've seen since leaving the road. And yeehaw. That should be the valley that I'm accessing reserve from. It keeps getting really black back there. Wind will pick up to the point where I'm staggering around. It'll start raining, and then it just kind of floofs. I think stuff's just missing me down here. Unfortunately, it looks like I missed an inReach message. So there's a little bit of a coordination snarl on the trailhead pickup. I occasionally get dickish comments basically asking why I have Jen do the bookings. The reason is partially just the whole making sure she feels involved. I mean, this whole lifestyle thing wouldn't work if it was just one of us. And I have had cases where I got a hold of somebody, they needed to get back to me because there was a change and they couldn't reach me because cell comes in and out. So I found it's better generally to go through Jen. It also saves the inReach messages because I get 10 free messages a month with the basic plan. And that means a message out and a message in equals 2. So it's pretty limited. And every now and then somebody will flood me with a huge long message. And each 160 characters counts. The other fun thing is if somebody uses the iMessage reactions, like thumbs up, something I text them through the inReach. Well, since my messages are generally going to be 160 characters, that thumbs up will send a reply to me costing 2 messages. And sure enough, trying to resolve things, I messaged the people, I'm sure Jen's messaged them, and they just replied to me using 2 separate little tiny messages. So we're going to have a higher inReach bill this month. It's only a couple of bucks, but still, I've just been spoiled. It seems like I've had pretty regular cell this entire time. So I kept coming over that hilltop down the ridge, and I kept expecting to reach a cell tower. And I didn't want to stop with it being so cold. And I forgot to take my inReach out in the morning. Oh well, I'll have a little bit of a wait at the trailhead, but where else I got to go? Yeah, here we go again. Okay, and welcome back to where the red and the blue lines basically meet. Though the shorter route is going to depart again pretty quick here. The Gila Alt basically goes straight, and then I go back out to the divide. AKA the part I've been talking about for like a year and looking forward to. Once again though, happy I took the red line. That was a really enjoyable bit of trail up there. I got the shuttle because while people have hitched from here, at least one person took from like 9 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There were multiple comments about how hard it was to get picked up, and considering my lack of time, previously I was trading time for money because I had plenty of time and wanted to keep costs down. I don't have as much time to burn here though, so get a ride in, resupply, get dropped off tomorrow hopefully. Also, the worst luck I have had hitchhiking was in the rain. That was going into mountain air. Didn't really want to live through that again. Plus side, I knew there was going to be a water cache here. Other people have used it. And now we play everybody's favorite game. What arrives first, the shuttle or the downpour? And it's getting slightly more interesting looking out here. Northbound, and I think that's just because people are... Okay, so the guy made it before the storm hit. I have a room. I am very much looking forward to not being out in all the storm at the moment. The shuttle driver did say it was supposed to snow today. And this is me. Unfortunately, it's like a 10-minute walk for food, but at least there's food. This place has a tub and a K-cup. That includes hot chocolate. Oh, I love this place. I decided the hunt for food was more important than laundry. Unfortunately, there's no Domino's option in a town like this. Uncle Bill's bar turned out to be the only thing open due to a combination of time of year, day of the week, and the fact it was a really small town. And the food was a little bit limited, but hey, it was hot. Bar food may not be the best, but it is better than no food. These short days are just killing me. It's only 5:30 in the evening. And it's already getting dark. And welcome to the only option for breakfast in town, apparently. Which, you know, as far as a meal out of a vending machine, it doesn't look too bad. So I've got some frozen breakfast burritos for the morning, a cookie for tonight, and it looks like the general store will open at 8 or 9, depending which source you believe. So tonight it's just going to be laundry and then some well-deserved rest and warmth. Have I mentioned warmth? I already spent like an hour soaking in the tub after I got in. I was so chilled. While the place I was staying did have laundry, they didn't have an attendant on site, and the laundry room didn't have any way to get quarters. So I ended up having to walk back across town a couple of times, scavenging across all the stores looking for quarters. Eventually I ended up back at the bar, and they had enough for me to do my laundry. Well, this town has not gone exactly smoothly, but I got some food, even if it wasn't great food, managed to eventually get my laundry done. hopefully the store opens in the morning. I'm able to resupply, get back to trail. It's going to be rough for the next 200 miles or so. I've got a 5-day carry into Winston, a 5-day carry after that. And the water situation is going to continue to be challenging. Once I'm down into Silver City, I think it's actually going to get better there, but that's way, way in the future. Home sweet home for the night.